Welcome back to a new episode of Conversations with Cohen. Today, I'm very excited to have my guest Saad Alam of Hone Health with me. Saad and I had the pleasure of meeting each other about a year ago, and I remember sitting in your offices, listening to your story, and not only being blown away, but thinking, boy, this is just something that a lot of folks need to hear. So Saad, first of all, thanks for taking the time. I know you've got a lot on your plate right now, but thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm stoked to be here.
Before we start, just to give listeners and viewers a little bit of context, could you help us understand a little bit about your role and the company that you've co-founded?
Yep. So I originally came up with the idea of what I'll call really complex treatment over telehealth because I ended up having this problem of low testosterone about 7 or 8 years ago. And we ended up starting a business that became and is now probably the largest men's hormone clinic in the country. And we use that really as a wedge to move into all these other categories around longevity. And so my job is more, let's see, is the customer experience built in the right direction? Do we have enough cash in the bank? What is the positioning? And are we marketing the business right? Are we making sure our customers are being treated right? It kind of touches everything. I would probably get really bored with it being just one very specific thing. And so I'm really lucky that I've got a bunch of co-founders that don't mind me meddling in their business on the daily.
When I first learned about the business, I thought with hormone therapy, boy, probably an incredibly um, highly scrutinized business that has a lot of government regulation, and and what a business to try to get involved in and try to build a network in. So perhaps you can share with us when you came up with this idea, what kind of obstacles did you face initially?
Whenever you decide to build a venture-backed business, you basically say, I want to be the largest of X in the country, if not the world. And so then when you come to the conclusion that I want to be one of the largest hormone providers in the country, you basically come to the conclusion that I want to be one of the largest distributors of what a controlled substance is in the entire country. And then you have to say to yourself, am I ready to take on that responsibility? And if I'm ready to take on that responsibility, you have to know every single last little piece of information about the regulations, about where the gray space in the regulations is, what is absolutely not allowed, and really what your own personal stance is on providing care. And I actually got so afraid of it. I ended up hanging up the company for about 4 months where I basically said, I don't know if I can do this.
Mm.
And I got legal advice from the best legal counsel in the country, Foley and Lardner. A guy named like Nate Lockman over there is arguably the best telehealth lawyer probably in the country. And I knew it was possible, but frankly, I just wasn't sure I was up to the task. And interestingly, the single biggest KPI in the company is patient safety. And so we built an entire business around making sure you do whatever is right for the patient and making sure the patient is safe at all times. We we take it so seriously that we've probably given away 35 to 40% of what could have been our revenue because we only want to treat patients in the safest manner possible.
What happened? What happened when you hung it up for a little while? What was what's the story there? What got the fear in you, if you will? Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe that's a big presumption.
No, it was fear. It's 100% fear. That's exactly what it is. It's kind of like this, right? If you build this business and you go wrong, you end up in jail. I'm just being completely candid.
Why?
There were
To
because you're
help
selling
give the context.
yeah. Okay. So we initially started the business by selling testosterone. The moment you hear testosterone, the hair on your neck probably goes up to some certain degree. Your body tenses up. It is a stigmatized product. And it's primarily because it's been associated with misuse, bodybuilders, and people don't necessarily think it's something that can actually improve the quality of their lives. Now, there are many conditions for men and for women where testosterone use is absolutely necessary, and they have a clinical condition, whether it's in menopause for women or it's in hypogonadism, which is clinically low testosterone for men. that they actually need to take very small doses in order to feel like themselves again. And that there's that concept of, most people think that we sell muscles and sex, which is like the best side effect of any treatment you will ever take. I can promise you that. But the reality is, we actually sell identity because we help people feel like themselves again so they can go take care of their responsibilities. And so when you say that I want to become the biggest distributor of testosterone in the country, that's a scary thing, because if you prescribe the wrong way, if you cross a boundary of telling your physician to how to prescribe, you fall into a place where you're practicing medicine not as a physician. And there were two executives that recently went to jail from a company selling ADHD medications called Done, that did exactly that. They stepped over the line. They didn't care about patient safety. They pushed this thing too hard, and unfortunately now they're doing some time because of it. And so you then have to say to yourself, if you're in a venture-backed business, there's one name of the game. It's growth. Grow as fast as you can. So rather than finding investors that just said grow, 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 we had to go find investors where we literally said, as part of the pitch, we're going to grow 30 to 40% slower than we possibly could grow, because we want to do everything completely above board. And most of them were like, that's crazy. That's not what you do. The name of the game is growth. And we were very lucky. And it took us a long time to find those investors that said, no, I actually care about the patient's safety more than anything else. And so, like, that was really almost like the agreement I had to get myself to in my head, and having to align myself with the right investors that believe the same exact philosophical approach. And going back to the fear thing, I am in love with my family. I love my mother, love my brother. I just got married 2 days ago. I love my wife. I love my dogs. I love my cold plunge, my sauna. I love to be able to go out. The idea of losing that because someone tried rushing a business is terrifying. And so when I figured out that if we're willing to go a little bit slower and have it all and find the right set of investors that are patient, I think that's where really the fear was, like, literally disappeared in my life. And so I mean, it's just been interesting. A lot of this business has been luck. It was lucky finding those first investors that believed in the same exact philosophical approach to care that we did. I was lucky that when COVID happened, which was one of the worst things that we've ever been through as a country, and if not maybe a world, the rules and regulations changed in a way for us to move a little bit faster across the country, which gave us a lot of wind in our sails. I was very lucky that the category we chose had such a perfect fit for what the world is looking for right now. Like, a lot of it has just been super lucky all the way around.
My first response is that you've created your own luck in some of these categories. So it'd be interesting to hear from you on the investor side. So you said you were lucky to find folks who aligned with you and what you were trying to do. I'd be curious to hear, for those who have an idea or have created a business and are looking for capital, how many dates did you have to go on before you met the right partner?
Okay, so let me give you two different ends of the spectrum. The first company I built, I had to go on about 40 dates before I got my first person to say yes to a check. Like, no, 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 until I got a first yes. This business was a little bit different because some of my prior investors put money into this business, just enough for me to do the research. And I got very lucky that there are a lot of guys, younger folks, that made a lot of money in crypto, and being in their 30s or their 20s and making a lot of money in crypto, and actually, interestingly, being very risk averse. They have this huge desire to live as long as possible now because they have all this cash they want to spend. And I just happened to meet some of those people at the right time in their lives, the right time in my life. And what could have been like the longest courting process was We met on a Saturday. We spent 7 hours on a Sunday together. We knew we were looking to impact the world in the same exact way, and it was an investment later on. That was the first one. Now, let me give you the second half of that. Our angel financing, or our first 1.5 million, came pretty quickly. It was we raised $40 million in total, getting from 1.5 to 5, not that difficult. And I was saying, I'm using these gradations because these are when the different financing levels happen. Getting from 1.5 to 5, not that difficult, just a function of time and talking to enough people, probably talking to about 75 people. When you're pitching investors, most of everything you hear is no until you find a lead. Going from $5 million invested to 10, snap of a finger. 2021, markets were hot. Everyone was excited. Found someone else who believed in our same exact approach to care. Chance walk on the Brooklyn Promenade turned into an investment within a couple of days. Now going from 10 to the next 15 and the next 15 to the next 15, oof. You're talking about having to raise capital when the private markets were deteriorating. Startups were no longer sexy. Everyone was losing capital. We had to go from burning a ton of capital in a fast growth mode into becoming profitable within 3 months, which we did. And then I literally stayed out there and I pitched and I pitched and I pitched. And I had to probably pitch, and I'm not lying, probably 150 to 200 investors, like a big number of investors, in order to raise the next 15. And then the last 15 that we got, it was serendipitous. It was like incoming interest. Someone was really interested in the category. Person at the fund practiced the same exact kind of life, saw the technology we built, realized how far it is ahead of anyone. And he's like, all right, listen, I'm going to invest in this company. So I think based upon where you are, what's happening in the macro environment, there are different levels of difficulty.
I hear that number 150, and you're spending money, and so reserves are going down, presumably. Yes, I understand you're profitable, but reserves are going down, and you need that money to get you to the next level. Can you give a little bit of insight into well, number one, a point where you're like, I'm not sure if this is actually going to happen, and how you may have dealt with that doubt.
You're going to think I'm lying when I say this, but I'm going to just tell you flat out the truth. There wasn't a single moment with this business that I knew it wasn't going to be a stunning success. I just knew it from the bottom of my soul when we started it, that this business was solving such a big problem, and we were approaching it from such a novel angle, and we were taking on such a difficult operational category that had such wonderful unit economics around it. And that if we just basically figured out how to stay on top of it, we're going to win. I think the other problem too is a lot of entrepreneurs believe when they go raise money from their investors, that let's say you go raise a $10 million slug of capital, whatever plan you put in front of them, you're expected to spend according to that plan, even if the business isn't working. And your investors are going to judge you based on how you spend that money, when the reality is your investors will love you if you keep the business alive and you make the business grow a whole lot slower and figure out how to slog it out in a difficult period. And they'll realize you're really an operator, not just a guy applying cash from a balance sheet to hire bodies. And I think that whenever we felt like there was a moment that, are we going to make it? It was like, yeah, that's really easy. You just take down the marketing spend and let half the team go if you need to. Now, we didn't ever want to do that. But knowing that you have that ace in your back pocket lets you know that you'll always be able to figure out a way to get through it. And I think that's in large part because my founding team members were such good operators, and we work so well together as a team. And we are all about getting through thick and thin together. And we had very similar kind of like family backgrounds that we all talked about, if we have to go back down to 5 or 6 people and gut this thing out, we're going to find another growth curve in the next business we build. So I don't think we had that existential threat. It was more, we've been very fortunate that even as we were starting to become profitable, we continue to grow. And I think it was more of a real balancing act to figure out how do you always grow every single month while figuring out how to become profitable at the same time.
Hmm. There's two things that I wanted to touch on from there. I'm not sure which one to go to first, but let me go with I'm getting into this really difficult business. Presumably, you talk to a lot of folks who are already in that business. And when you may have suggested the idea of what you were trying to do, there were a lot of people who said, Saad, you're crazy. Um, highly regulated. It's not going to work like this. You're not going to be able you're not going to be able to do this the way you think you can. Number one, did that happen, or was it hey, this is a great idea, Saad. Nobody's thought about this before. Run with it. Green light.
I think it was both. I think there were groups of, all right, so I think if you're looking for capital very specifically, there are different kinds of investors, right? There's investors that invest specifically because of category and market. There are investors that invest specifically on entrepreneur. There are investors that invest specifically on gut or feel, and they're not mutually exclusive, right? There's usually some combination of the two that people are using in order to make a bet. And I'd say the majority of guys that invested really early, it was 100% Saad. Like even when I make investments now and I'm writing a small check into a company, I get to meet the entrepreneur for, right, like half an hour to an hour. Maybe I've tracked them for a little while. It's not, do I think their business is incredible? It's, do I think the entrepreneur is good enough? Because I promise you the business that he thinks he's building is not the business that eventually he will build, and that he's willing to figure it out and kind of like move based upon what the macro environment's showing him, right? All we do is we take capital, we run a series of experiments based upon what we think is going to be reality, and we have to respond to what reality actually teaches us. Some people can't do that. Most people can't do that. The select, I think, really good can do that. And so I think some people are like, hey, look, I just believe in you so much that you're going to figure this out because you're so damn passionate about it. There's that one category. There's another category, like when you talk about like real institutional investors and they're approaching it a little bit more from a market perspective, they do a lot of the single biggest complaint I got. There are two very big complaints I got at the beginning. The first is, why doesn't a company like Hims or Roe do this? I must have answered that question hundreds of times over. The other one is, you will literally get an investor to look at the business and go, holy shit, this is one of the best businesses I've ever seen in health. You'll get them right to the finish line. Right? I mean, when I say to the finish line, you were there. You think like you were getting married. And then they would say, oh, I don't know, man. Just something about the category makes me nervous and I just can't get there. That has happened to me. I want to say, I'm like being very serious when I say this, 12 to 15 times. Right? And some of them have been big checks. You get them right there. You're in it for 3 months. And then you're like, oh, I get it though. I get it. And you know what it tells us? Not the right investor for us. Right. And so we're actually not upset about it. We basically understand like you have to respect someone's risk tolerance. And also, if someone is coming in and they don't have a deep understanding of the space and they're hearing everything an entrepreneur has to say, if I'm being perfectly honest, right? Like entrepreneurs are salesmen, and we're living in a little bit of our own distorted reality field. And some of us are really good at understanding where the black and white and the truth is, versus some people, they just go so far into the ether. You actually think they're drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit too hard. And I think that investors' job is really difficult because if they're not really comfortable with that industry, they're really relying upon what the entrepreneur is saying. And very often they're checking in with sources that may actually be a little more conservative in their stance. And so they may not be able to find the level of alignment they're looking for.
So let me ask you this, because I think this is a lesson that's applicable to so many different roles and industries, not just in entrepreneurship. But how do you detach from that result? So detach from you get to goal line, you think you're going to get married, and then it doesn't happen. A deal falls apart. So how have you learned to detach from the results and making that and helping that define you?
When people ask me what my skill set is, one of the things I say is my skill set is learning how to fail and taking the wisdoms of nugget or the nuggets of wisdom from it and applying them to the problem in a different way over and over and over without losing enthusiasm. And I think like, right, they're all, when you talk to startup folks, people always had talk about like the stoic way of approaching life, which is like, right, Ryan Holiday wrote a book called The Obstacles Away, which is basically if you wake up in the morning and believe that you're on this amazing journey and there's always going to be obstacles in that journey, and your job is to figure out a way to get around them, you're never surprised when you get to that obstacle. And when you have lived as an entrepreneur, especially as a founder for 15 years, and your life has been nothing but problems every single day. Yep. And when I say like nothing but problems, I mean a dozen new problems per day or 5 new problems per day. It just becomes a large part of like your default psyche, which is, oh, problem. Okay, let me fix that. I'll tell you the place it doesn't work in your relationship though, because my wife, if I try fixing her problems, I think most of the time she just wants me to hear me. He just wants me to listen to her. But like in a startup setting,
sounds like my wife, man, by the way.
It is. God bless you. God bless our wives. And I've realized that the way to solve that problem is just to listen empathetically and really make sure I understand it. But in like when you're building startups, the name of the game is, okay, great. You learn that. What does that mean? Let's go do it. And I'll give you like a great example. We launched the testosterone business 4 years ago. It's outstanding. It is one of the best businesses I've seen. We then decided to expand that from testosterone to what I'll call like far broader longevity care. We took the total number of biomarkers that we were looking at and increased them by 5x, the total number of medications that we were selling and increased them by 7x. And so the entire model has so much more complexity in it. And when we first launched it, it was a horrible business. But we know that launch the business, learn what's not working, get in, start tweaking the funnels, watch conversion, change the ads, help the physicians understand treatment a little bit better, and it will work in time. And so within 5 months, worked, scaled. We launched the women's part of our business. The moment we launched the women's part of our business, it was actually an okay business. And we had, just from seeing it was an okay business, we said, this is going to be way better than the men's business. We ran the same exact play, tweaked it. That business is going to outperform the men's business by like 30 or 40%. And so I think so much of your skill set as an entrepreneur is just understanding break. How do you fix as fast as possible and understand a bunch of things are going to break tomorrow too. And you don't lose your passion for fixing problems. And so I think going back to like all the no's, you heard a no, what did I learn? All right, cool, I'm out. And I think a large part of it is I know very quickly when I think the investor and us will kind of like vibe on a very personal level and we get each other and this is a good deal to be done. Because now it's also on the flip side, which is before when I built my first business, I was always dying to get money and trying to understand and how to apply it to the business without it running out. And now I look at it very much differently as just a tool that I can use in order to accelerate the business. And I'm very cautious about like, do I like you as a person? And if I like you as a person, do we want to spend time together? And I think that when you change your mindset from one of scarcity to one of abundance, it changes the way that you're looking for partners pretty dramatically.
They can feel that, I'm sure. I'm sure they can feel that. How do you prioritize? So you mentioned all these problems that you have every day. How do you prioritize those problems? How do you make sure that the right problems get fixed first? Because I can imagine, you talk about scarcity, you got a scarcity of time, and you could probably solve a lot of those problems and it might not move the business. So just if you could help us understand how you think about things.
I read a really great stat a couple months ago that when you look at CEOs of large companies and ask them how much of their time is spent on the priorities of the business, it ends up being like an hour and a half to 2 hours per day. And one could argue that is absolutely absurd because you're spending time on things that are predominantly urgent that may not even really move the business exactly to your point. And I think that when I look at all my problems in the morning, I tend to, if I were to crack open my Apple Notes, I have all my problems categorized. And so it's a list of like 60 things at any given time that have to be completed. And they're broken down into what has to get done tomorrow, what has to get done in the week, and which are the other things that I want to get to and they're important when I have time, and I'll figure out how to get them done. In both of those buckets, I'm going to take that back. There's another category above that that's important things. And those important things are large strategic initiatives or priorities that I have to get done that I know will take some course of time that I'm leading myself. And so when I wake up in the morning, I actually do this the night before. I look at what is on those lists. Those lists change every 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I'm in a meeting, something else goes on it, something else gets pulled off of it. I organize the list so I know what it is I'm tackling the next day. Now, inadvertently, something happens over the night, almost always, and something gets put on the top list by early morning. And so what ends up happening is if I start to see a lot of urgent problems from one particular place, let's call it customer service, my first inclination is, do I have the right leadership in place? And so then I have to think about, do I have the right leaders long term in order to run that part of the business? Because at the end of the day, there's certain problems that just shouldn't rise above a certain level. And I'm a very like hands-on operator leader, as are all my other co-founders. And so we like to know a lot about what's happening in the business. And if I were to kind of categorize what's urgent versus important, I probably spend, if I look at my calendar, 40% of my days in meetings, 30% of my day in kind of like really urgent things to get done that are burning needs of the business, and then another 30% on like strategic priorities. And what I have noticed though, is as we've grown from like over the past couple of months, we've grown from like 60 employees to like 120, not counting our doctors, 130 folks. All of a sudden, my calendar's up until 6 o'clock, 14 back-to-back meetings. And then I still have to work for 4 hours afterwards. And it makes it really hard to tackle your to-do lists. And so the conclusion I've kind of come to is at this stage of our growth right now, I'm now starting to say, how do I carve most things off my calendar again so I can go back to strategic priorities and the burning issues of the business? Because getting caught in meetings all day long, I mean, it sucks your soul out.
Sure.
Completely.
Sure.
Waste of time.
Yep. You've brought up your co-founders a number of times. So you mentioned something earlier, which was that you and your co-founders all have very similar family values. So I know I'm changing. I know I'm changing topics here, but as people think about successful businesses and the people that they surround themselves with, I was hoping you could share a little bit about what the aspects of your respective families are that make you work so well together.
So I use this as a litmus test almost always, whether good or bad. It's my litmus test, and it works. No matter how many times I tried breaking it, it works. I'm very close to my family, absurdly close. It is my mother lives in my building. My brother lives in my building. My brother works with us. My wife is an entrepreneur. She works out of our house every day. I see her more than most people see their spouses. And the conclusion I've come to is people used to really talk about like a work-life balance. And what I've just done is make my work and my life just all one large kind of like beautiful, I hate to use the word like a symphony because that sounds a little bit too woo or a little bit too trite. But the reality is that's literally the way my life is structured. Is I can have all the people I love in my life. I can see them. I can watch them grow. And I don't ever have to take my foot off the business. But at the end of the day, my number one priority is my family. And so I have, we'll call it like 4 co-founders technically, and every single one of them loves and appreciates their family the same exact way. Some of them they're immigrants, so they've raised I'm sorry, they live with their parents and take care of them in their old age. And they have good relationships with their spouses. And the reason why all those things are important is because when you're building a business together with someone, at the end of the day, you're working with a person and it's all about the relationship you have with them. Yes, we do work. And if you're good, but you're an asshole, it's not going to work. But really, we got to make sure that we, at the end of the day, care about the same things. And so, like, a very big thing at our company is we work ourselves to the bone. And I mean, like, Greg, we work hard. But the moment something needs to be handled with your family or someone is sick, no questions asked, go handle your family, whether it's a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, don't care. Just let us know how it's going. But when you're back in the saddle, like, you were expected to go hard. And so I think all of us understand that about each other really well. And I think that's one of the kind of the things that's held us together through some pretty tough times.
So it's those shared values of understanding, and it sounds like not only the shared values and but the priority, but and I might be putting words in your mouth, but that at the end of the day, family is the foundation, and if you don't have a strong foundation, nothing else is you're not gonna be able to build anything else on top of it.
Hey, look, if your mom doesn't like you, in certain cases that could happen for all the right reasons, but more often than not, if your mom doesn't like you, like, problem, chances are we're going to have a problem with you. I know I don't want it to be like a generality or like an
No,
absolute
no, no, no.
universal truth, but it's just something we always think about.
Sure. Did any of these co-founders work with you in your previous business?
No, they didn't. One of them I had recruited really hard for probably 4 years until it was the right time for him to join this business.
And so,
But
what was that business that you had before?
so the first business I built was an education technology business. And it really was like an enterprise level writing platform, which helped kids become better writers by helping them organize their thoughts into cohesive structures. And interestingly, he was in a business doing online learning, and he happened to build the largest online learning company in the country. And I had been literally like every 2 months, lunches, calls with him, trying to convince him to come over. But he was on a rocket ship, and it made a ton of sense for him to stay where he was. And it wasn't until we started building this business and he started having very simpler problems and complications that he felt like it was a really great place to be.
And the first business that you started, was that based upon a need that you identified from your own personal experience?
Yes. So that particular one was my brother had called me up one day and told me he was dropping out of college. And it didn't sit easy with me because I was paying for it and education is just such a large part of our lives. And I realized he was struggling to write. And I helped him get through the end of that semester. And what I thought was so shocking is that it's like 67, 68% of the kids in this country are below proficient at writing. And if you can't write or organize your thoughts, you really can't succeed in the real world. And so that was born from a very personal place, as is this company. And I think the conclusion I've come to is I am what I'll call like a mission driven entrepreneur. I only build companies based upon problems that have deeply touched me because I just don't care about them enough. Like the next business I build, I know exactly what it'll be. I know exactly what industry, I know exactly what itch it will scratch and how I think it'll contribute to the rest of the world. But that's just the thing that gets me up and gets me really excited.
Where did this come from for you, or what can you point to where that you think, okay, I see a need, I'm going to go and build it? Like where, if you had to point to your own background of maybe it's your childhood, maybe it's something that happened, earlier on in your adolescence. Where did it?
It's really, it's a question I've asked myself a ton because it's like this obsession that's crafted my life in the most profound way because it's defined who I am as a person. And I was really, really lucky to have two parents that just loved the hell out of me. And we grew up, right? Like classic immigrant story. Like father comes here with $5 in his pocket. Family grows up poor. Father figures out how to get ingrained into American society, and is able to build a life for him in a new country. And one of the things my parents always told me about was how important it is to have an impact on other people's lives. Like when I say like they told me about it, it was a part of everything that we did. And this is
How
also going
how
to
so?
sound
How so?
crazy.
By the way, how so? How when you're talking about it in other people's lives?
My parents did not stop telling me about how lucky we were as people to be where we were in life, regardless of the fact that we just maybe didn't have as much as the people around us. And a large part of my life was going back to Pakistan every year, every other year. And when you go back to Pakistan, you, even if you are not very wealthy, you generally have people that are your servants. And these people have nothing. And I remember I was probably a greedy little boy, and I used to love toys. And my dad would teach me year after year, when you go there, if one of the servants that are working there, the people in the house, and I hate calling them servants because that's just it's a horrible word. They would look at the toys and my father would say, give it to them. And I'd be like, no, not. He's like, no, listen, you don't get it. Like that is, you are impacting someone's life and you will be able to get so much more by who you are inside. Just give it to them and don't think about it. And so from a very young age, when I say young, one, right, 1 years old, that was just a very big part of my life. Give back, give back, give back. And I realized it used to make me feel so damn good. And then my parents would always say, my father was he was a Stanford PhD in particle physics that discovered a bunch of particles. And his given life was how to find that there's a God. That's like his entire life was geared towards that. And my parents also being Pakistani were Muslim, and a large part of the religion, and as in all religions, frankly, is like having an positive impact on this life. And I'm going to get really deep here but this is like the true reason why it became so important to me. There's basically a part in the religion that says hellfire rests under your parents' feet, and what it translates to is that if your parents raise bad kids, your parents are going to hell. And so there's actually a ton of guilt that if I don't give back and do well, I'm going to send my parents to hell. And I love them so much. And so that became just a very important running force in my life and literally became the thing that made me want to give back as much as possible. And now I've realized after my father's passed, it is one of the things that gives me the most amount of joy. And frankly, like part of what I believe is by building companies, I'm just giving back as much as I possibly can in the very unique way that I think I'm only qualified to give back.
Hmm.
Like, I don't think there's another founder in this country that would have built this company the way we built it based upon the experiences I've had.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's a little bit woo,
No,
but it's
look,
very much it's the reason.
look, everyone's own life is what creates their reality. So, I don't think it's fair to say one way or the other. It just that's that was you, and that was your upbringing. So that's it. Um, I want to be mindful of your time, and I appreciate how much time you've shared with us so far. So as we wrap things up, for those who are listening who are entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs, people who have an idea, any final thoughts, words of wisdom to share with them as they embark on their own journeys?
God, there are a lot. Um, I guess the first thing I'll kind of like I'll like talk about two or three things. People always ask me when's the time to take the jump, and what I always tell people is that when you're going to think of problems to solve, you're going to think about ideas, and ideas are going to come and go, but there's going to be an idea that almost like burns itself a place in your mind that no matter what you do, you just can't let go of this idea. You think about it constantly like that. It could be obsessively, it could be non-obsessively, but it could be in your head for 4 or 5 years. And there's a point in which you have to ask yourself, I can, I got my MBA. You're probably making two and a quarter every single year, and you're living your life working for someone else, and you're comfortable because you've got a nice apartment in like Flatiron, and you probably are going to Equinox and you think like, hey, I've kind of arrived. And there'll be a moment in time where you have to ask yourself, do you believe in yourself so much that you're willing to throw that life away for what could be 10 years or 15 years? And when you have an idea and when you believe in yourself so much that you're going to be able to figure out how to bring that idea to life, that you don't care about that life, that's the right time to jump. So that would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is, I think when I built my first company, I didn't understand how to actively seek out talent that was smarter than I was and convince them to work with me. And I think that by working with people that you're almost intimidated by, you become smarter so much faster. And if you can put 3 or 4 of those people together, you guys can be deadly so long as you have like the right cultural values. And I think that that cultural values piece is arguably like one of the most important pieces behind teamwork. Like, you don't have to be a family. People are very rarely families that are businesses. You have to be a high performing team that care about the same thing and are aligned to it. And the reason why the values are important is everything will inevitably break. It'll, even if it's a great ride, and I can tell you I've had a great ride, we probably should have died 6 or 7 times over. And it's always the founders that stuck together. And now we've just done it so many times. We're kind of like, I don't care how thorny it looks. We're just going to figure it out. And then the third thing I'd probably say is you have to make sure that you are also growing over the course of time as the business grows, meaning the person that you start the business as is going to acquire a lot of skills and knowledge and experience. And you can integrate them and continue holding the same beliefs you did before. But the people that I think are the most successful that I look up to, they literally change throughout the process. Like, their values stay the same, but them as people and their skill sets, you can literally, you can watch them change in as fast as 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. And you should be actively trying to up level who you are as an individual and your own belief set as it's happening, and not stay the person you were when you were at like a 3-person desk at WeWork, which, by the way, I have nothing against that. I love WeWorks. We're in a WeWork right now. But my point is, you have to be uncomfortable enough to force yourself to grow in real time. And I think a lot of people forget to do that.
Okay, well,
so those would be my 3.
Super. That's invaluable. So thank you very much for sharing that. And thank you for the time that you've spent with us. For those who want to learn more about Hone Health and reach out to you, how do people find the company and you?
All right. So company is Hone Health, HONE health.com. I'm at Saad Alam, M as in Michael, SAADALAM as in Michael. On Instagram, you can email me at salam@honehealth.com. Those are the best ways to get to find me anywhere.
Amazing. Saad, thanks so much for taking the time with us today. This has been Conversations with Cohen, and really enjoyed talking to you. So thanks again.
Great. Same here.